Good afternoon, and thank you for joining today's MLC Masterclass series, Unlocking New Opportunities with the Industrial Metaverse, AI, and Data Ecosystems, Reflections from Hannover Fair 2023. Before we begin, just a few housekeeping items. We have muted all participant lines to maintain sound quality throughout the session. But we do encourage you to ask questions during the session at any point by placing them in the questions box, which is located likely on the right-hand side of your screen. We'll do our best to address all of your questions either during the session or during the Q&A portion of the event. And lastly, this session is being recorded and will be sent via email within 24 hours of the session concluding, as well as be available on the Manufacturing Leadership Council website within about 5 to 7 business days. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to turn it to today's moderator, MLC's founder, Vice President, and Executive Director, Mr. David Brosell. David, over to you.
Thank you, Lauren, and welcome to everyone to our panel discussion today. I'm sure you're going to find this very, very interesting as we talk about some cutting-edge subjects for manufacturing companies throughout the world, really. So a little bit of some background here. The 76th annual Hannover Fair, which, as some of you may know, is the world's largest industrial trade exhibition, took place in Germany last month with about 130,000 attendees and 4,000 exhibitors. MLC was at the fair to get a sense of the latest developments as the industry continues its journey to the digital model of manufacturing. It was the first time MLC was at the fair since 2019, just before the pandemic hit, and there were some very significant developments this year. Today, we are going to focus on 3 of those developments that were most prominent at the fair last month: the emergence of so-called data ecosystems, the proliferation of AI systems, and the beginning of industrial metaverse applications. As you will hear from our panelists this afternoon, developments in these 3 subjects have not and do not occur in isolation. They are connected in a number of ways. MLC published a detailed report of its findings at the fair on April 25th. It can be found on the MLC website under blogs. With regard to the subject of data ecosystems, this is one of the 3 we're going to be talking about this afternoon. One of the developments discussed widely at the fair was the concept called Manufacturing X, which was the subject of a white paper published by the German government in 2022. Manufacturing X aims to create what that white paper described as an industrial data economy for the future. It would do so by developing a safe and agile infrastructure or ecosystem for manufacturing companies to network, share, and exchange product and other information with approved partners and customers in a standardized way. Manufacturing X is an attempt to solve many of the current issues companies face in creating end-to-end real-time visibility across supply chains and in scaling their digital transformation projects. Artificial intelligence, the second of our subjects today, as you might expect, was greatly in evidence throughout the fair. Many discussions were had about generative AI such as ChatGPT. It was on the minds of everyone at the fair. Underpinning many of the developments in AI has been the availability of ever larger volumes of data as manufacturing companies become more connected. One Hannover speaker estimated that 80% of the data being generated in manufacturing today remains unused. Hence, the growing importance of AI systems to help process the volumes and make sense of the information. Lastly, the early applications in the industrial metaverse were very much in evidence also at the fair. The industrial metaverse being a collection of technologies, these applications combined digital twins, embedded AI, VR and AR, visors, and 5G communications networks to showcase how early metaverse use cases could create collaborative virtual spaces for such applications in training, e-commerce, remote operations, preventive maintenance, and troubleshooting. With that, let's get into our panel discussion. I'm very pleased to welcome our panelists for today. Amal Adganakar, the Senior Director of Manufacturing and Mobility at Microsoft. Sudhir Arni, Senior Vice President of Business Outcomes at Sight Machines. And our good friend from NTT Data, who you've seen on many of these webinars, Bhaskar Radhakrishnan, from who is the Strategic Advisor at Manufacturing Industry Solutions. I was hoping to get through all those names without a flaw, but you have to permit me that one. And not least, I'm very pleased to have with us a former member of the MLC Board of Governors, Dr. Detlef Zulke, who is an honorary board member of the Smart Factory KL and retired professor for industrial automation in Germany. And he's with us from Germany this afternoon. So welcome, Dr. Zulke. So let's get into the first question area of the three areas we want to talk about, and that's data ecosystems. What are data ecosystems? We've heard this phrase bandied about. It was much in conversation at Hannover this year. Why don't I start with Dr. Zulke? Can you give us a definition of what is a data ecosystem?
Yes, I can do so. Perhaps also my camera again. So can you see me? No?
Yes, we can see you now.
Right. So everyone knows actually the cloud systems today. A data ecosystem is much more than just a cloud system. Following a definition which I found with McKinsey, for example, it says a data ecosystem is a platform that combines data from numerous providers and builds value by the usage of processed data. So the primary purpose is to create, manage, and sustain the sharing of data across platforms and domains. So it needs then worldwide networks, it needs the data, and it needs many, many participants using this data via this ecosystem.
Okay. Well, sharing data sounds like a really interesting and almost altruistic idea. I'd like to get some reactions from our other panelists about this whole concept of data ecosystems and data sharing. What do you all think about that? Amal, would you like to start off?
Yes, of course. Thank you, David, for having us on the call and on this webinar. You know, data is the new oil, they say, right? It's for a reason. And you know, if you go back to even the principles of Six Sigma, for example, you talk about the DMAIC framework. If you want to improve something, you got to measure, and if you want to measure, you need data. So I think it all starts from going back to, you know, productivity improvements, efficiency improvements. This is where it starts, but like you rightly said, it's an ecosystem. Nobody here is, you know, on an island. Everybody is working in a connected network. It's connected everything these days. So clearly, you know, working together with, you know, suppliers, partners, customers, and the broader ecosystem is very critical for everybody in the manufacturing world. But perhaps I'll hand over to the others in the team here to contribute.
Yeah, I'd be interested in the views of Bhaskar and Sudhir on this as well, because somewhere buried in this definition is the idea that data will be more valuable, more powerful if it's in multiple hands rather than just one. Bhaskar, what's your thoughts about this data ecosystem concept? Am I right or am I off base on that?
No, you're absolutely right, spot on. So, but just to kind of level set this conversation, right? So the data ecosystem perhaps is relatively new, if you will, in the context of manufacturing, especially in the context of across the value chain within the manufacturing industry. But this is fairly been in existence and quite widely being adopted by the industries like retail, advertising, media, entertainment industry, e-commerce industry, and all the customized personalizations, products and services. What you see here, even for example with Amazon and all that, is all as a result of data being shared across the stakeholders, across the value chain. But I agree. I think this is an emerging concept within the manufacturing industry, where sharing of the data across the value chain, across the network, across the supply chain is going to tremendously change the way how manufacturing is going to operate going forward. So this is probably an emerging concept when it comes to operations and supply chain. But even within manufacturing, we have also heard about sharing data when it comes to product sourcing side of it. If you look at it, product engineering, product sourcing side within the supply chain aspect. So I think now what we are looking at is across the value chain, how we can help monetize the data, which can result in some, process improvement, operational improvement, or any kind of better decision making.
Sudhir, do you agree with Bhaskar that this whole concept of data ecosystems has pretty significant implications for the future for manufacturers?
Absolutely. I think there's tremendous impact that can be had. If you just think about factories in general, physically, they are connected to each other. It doesn't really matter if a factory is part of an enterprise A versus enterprise B. The whole chain is about, you take some raw material, you convert that into some components, some intermediate components, goes into another factory, becomes a final product, goes to consumers. There is a connected tissue overall. But when you look at the data that exists in these factories, today they're not connected via data, but they're physically connected. They're transferring goods from one to another. This is definitely the next phase. There's a lot of data. If they can start connecting factories to factories with the data fabric as well, there is amazing impact that can be seen. We see that already in a number of industries, especially material intensive industries such as the whole paper value chain, aluminum value chain, glass value chain. All manufacturers want to share data with each other. They need to know what the business case is to be able to do that. But the willingness is beginning to take shape.
Yeah, that's what I'd like to get at. So it sounds like an interesting concept. If we can do it technologically, we'll probably do it just because we can do it technologically, kind of Grove's law there. But what's really in it for manufacturers to do this? What are they going to get out of it? Are they going to get out of it greater efficiencies? Are they going to be able to expand their markets, react faster to changes in their markets, make more money? What's in it for them? Why should they be interested? Who'd like to? Bhaskar, would you like to take that first?
Yeah, sure. I'll definitely give it a shot, and then others can add to it as well. I think first and foremost, I look at it, the ability to make a data-driven decision and adapt rapidly to changing market conditions, customer preferences. It is critical for manufacturers now to share and ensure that the data is accessible in order to remain competitive and also be resilient in today's dynamic market conditions. I think by embracing the data ecosystem, manufacturers can harness the power of data to drive, to your point, the operational efficiencies, or innovate more newer offerings, innovate faster, quicker, by connecting with their end customers or consumers better, so that they understand the preferences. That's one perspective, but also I'm looking at it from an agility and adaptability perspective, right? By analyzing the streaming data, manufacturers can quickly detect the shifts in customer preferences, the market trends, reconfigure their production or the production processes, optimize inventory levels to stay ahead of curve, right? So that's one perspective, and the other aspect is I'm also looking at it from improving the quality. For example, I think Sudhir sort of touched on that as well when he kind of responded to that first question. Improving a quality, because the manufacturers are not just manufacturing, they work with many number of suppliers, the tiered vendors, other suppliers. How can you collaborate with them to improve the quality of the product by sharing your process parameters, your production parameters, your production data? Of course, there are other sensitivity, the legal frameworks and other aspects involved, but how can they collaborate with their even tiered vendors to kind of make the products even quicker and faster and be able to launch the product quickly in the market? So those are some of the very high level use cases that we can think of. I'll let Sudhir and other panelists to add to it.
Yeah, Sudhir, any comment you'd like to add to it? I mean, Bhaskar has talked about the potential to get to market faster with a product, collaborate more effectively with people you're working with and companies you're working with. Do you see any other benefits from this?
I agree with everything Bhaskar is saying. I think those are really large themes that are coming across manufacturers. There is another immediate theme that we are seeing in a number of different spaces right now is really around greenhouse gas emission, even measurement of that. Most manufacturers, especially if you look at the final assembly plants, be it auto OEMs, be it food and beverage final assembly, or whoever else, have such a vast network of internal manufacturing facilities as well as suppliers. Everyone in the world attributes about 25% of greenhouse gas emissions to industry or manufacturing. But if you go to a plant today, it's really hard for them to tell you how much emission they actually have because of their manufacturing process. Number of manufacturers would love to have their factories connected across the value chain and start in real time measuring what is the greenhouse gas footprint for them. How can they optimize it? Going back to the initial point that Amol made, if you cannot measure it, that's very hard to improve it. That measurement is a significant lever that manufacturers would like to think about. If they share data, it could be done.
Yeah. So a whole basket or group of potential benefits I'm hearing here. If you can make the decision to start understanding what a data ecosystem is and start getting involved in trying to implement one, do you think this all adds up to a change in the competitive field? In other words, if you're right about all this, a manufacturer would have to develop a real competency in this whole idea of data ecosystems in order to remain competitive in their markets. Do you see this happening in the next few years? Who'd like to take that one first? Sudhir, would you like to continue that? And then I'll pass it around to Amal and to Bhaskar and to Detlef.
I think in specific industries for sure. I'll give you some examples. Factories which are using data well, all the existing data, the kind of improvements that they see in their efficiencies and their costs are to the tunes of 25, 30, 40%. These are significant improvements as compared to what typically has been possible in productivity. That reduces the unit cost of operations enough that a lot of these companies are rethinking what their manufacturing network looks like. One example in the auto industry, we've spoken to a number of large players, it's not been done yet, has been really around just-in-time production. A real single-piece flow was made possible in auto industry by having the final assembly plant and all the other supplier plants co-located. There is potentially a future where they might not have to do that. If the unit cost of production drops 40, 50%, do you have to make sure 60 plants are co-located? Maybe not. Maybe they're sharing data with each other and the plants are located, distributed in different locations, because now you don't have to focus as much on the inventory cost or the transportation cost because your manufacturing cost has dropped. That is a competitive lever, especially in the auto industry, which is possible and a lot of companies are thinking about. Possibilities are there.
Yeah, very interesting. Other competitive aspects or ramifications of this, Amal?
Yeah, definitely. I think when it comes to having an edge in the market, innovation plays a big role. And if you think of employees within a manufacturing organization who want to sort of innovate on new ideas or draw insights or create new product services, they need access to that data. And like Bhaskar said earlier, there are use cases around improving productivity, or what Sudhir said around cost optimization. You can start with one of these use cases and of course, go hunting for information. The challenge that we run into very quickly is that a lot of the information sits in different data sets, different siloed systems, 10, 15, 20, you pick, they are all over the map, so to speak. So the traditional approach has been, let's find out what we want to do and go get those pieces of information, put them together, like, get your recipe ingredients and then make your recipe kind of thing, right? There is now a new way of of thinking around this, and this is a new paradigm that is evolving. Everybody somewhere now believes, or has faith or trust in that if you get the right data, the right access to it, you can unlock value from it. I think everybody believes in it now. The question is, how do you get that data platform to be created? So a lot of the cutting edge manufacturers right now are taking proactive steps to actually build a data platform. So you bring all those disparate silos, of information together into a common, large, trusted, scalable, data platform from which your employees, your organization can self-serve information out of it, or can self-serve analytics out of it. This empowers the employees as well. It gives them the drive to go innovate, do new things, optimize existing processes, do all the good things that you want them to do, which otherwise they would have run into a significant hurdle in terms of getting access to these nuggets of information. So I think there's value in terms of thinking about a platform strategy upfront, and this is where we see a lot of the new innovative manufacturers taking an edge in the competitive sense.
I'm starting to hear the word standards come out. I mean, we've got to move in that direction if we're talking about company to company. Internally is one thing, but company to company is another. Supply chain, value chains is another. Dr. Zulka, are we going to have standards for data ecosystems?
Oh, yes, absolutely. We need it. First of all, sure, this is a highly competitive field in which we talk about. So companies today, especially when I look here into the EU, in the European Union discussion, we need, for example, values on carbon footprint, and we need it immediately. So not in days or in weeks, we need it immediately. So there must be a way of getting this data very quickly from all the possible people delivering the goods to us. So this is only possible if we have this data ecosystem on the one hand side, but on the other side, it needs the standardized access to all this. So we need the structure for the data, we need the content of the data, and we need a lot of other things. So in future, I think it's really a challenge to define these standards. There are a lot of things available already today, but the more we move into this new world, the more we need furthermore standards. For example, on the services which we can offer from a manufacturer for a specific product, and these services are then connected to carbon footprint items, to supply chain items, and whatever else. And all this must be found in the data of the different companies and must be accessed by those who are willing to cooperate with these companies. Today we have this data mostly already, but you don't have this open access to all this because we did not have the access to the different devices where we can collect all this data. But with Industry 4.0, we have this. We have the networks, we have the standardized connectors or wireless connections, for example. So it's quite easy to get this data. But now we must make use of this data because, as we heard already, it is a value and it's very important to make revenue with it. And those who won't follow this way, they are out of the business pretty soon, I'm sure.
Well, I couldn't help but think of that old adage. The great thing about standards is that there are so many of them. Bhaskar, do you think we'll be able to achieve standards in the manufacturing industry? You mentioned some other industries that are moving ahead already on data ecosystems. Are they embracing standards? Are you optimistic?
I think so. I think it's a long way to go. I think, we have been talking about creating standards within the factory, within the four walls of an enterprise. Now we are looking at beyond the four walls of an enterprise, possibly across, the value stream and other areas, the value chain, across the value chain. It's going to take a while, but I'm optimistic. Hopefully one day we will be there. But when it comes to other industries, I think they're all primarily focused around the customer preferences aspect of it, not so much on the rest of the other value chain. But I assume, again, I have very limited exposure to other industries outside of manufacturing. But I think they do have some sort of framework. But again, there is a lot of other it's not just only the data framework part of it. We also have sort of a legal framework which is required, because who owns the data and stuff like that, right? So there's a lot of other legal and governance around the data framework is also required, not just focused on creating the data models. So
yeah, no, there's definitely a number of challenges, but
yep.
let me stick with you for a moment, Bhaskar, because I wanted to ask the question about, if we've made a good case here so far that this idea of data ecosystems is important for manufacturers for a number of reasons going into the future, how do you go about building one? Where would a manufacturer get started? Can I ask you that to start off on that one, Bhaskar?
Sure, absolutely. So that's an interesting question, right? So where do we get started? So we look at it from this perspective, right? Essentially, I think they should start with a data strategy as an overall data strategy for the enterprise, right? The strategy that should align with their business objectives, define the goals very clearly in terms of what they want to achieve with this data. Are you looking to improve operational efficiencies or product quality or a customer satisfaction or optimize your supply chain, etc., right? So I think the strategy is number one, to have a very clear vision of where they want to go. The second one is about the data collection framework, because the data comes from different sources, different formats, different streaming data versus structured data, unstructured data, different machines and production processes. How do you collect data from different sources, and how do you make sure that you create a common schema or a common data foundation which can be used for consumption? So that's the second one. And the third aspect is about the data integration, since the data come from different sources, and how do you create a data lake sort of an environment and create an integration so that is easy for transformation and the harmonization and eventually for consumption. And the other one I'm also looking at is from a data governance and security perspective, right? How do you ensure the data quality so that people can trust the data that they can consume or they consume, right? So in order to maintain sanity on the data, the quality, I think you need a proper structure from a data governance practices need to be established so that there is a right data quality and integrity and security associated with it. And the last one is about the continuous improvement, right? The data needs to be continuously, the model needs to be trained and needs to be continuously monitored, and over a period of time make improvements to the data. So ensure that you regularly evaluate and refine your data ecosystem so that a right analytics and the consumption can be made, right? So I think it is going to be a phased approach. I don't think an organization will be ready on day one with the absolute state of maturity in terms of data, creating a data ecosystem. It's going to be a crawl, walk, and run is what I believe.
Yeah, much of what you said strikes me as rolling up into being able to trust it. You've got to have trust of this data. Would you agree, Sudhir, Detlef, Amal? Who would like to jump on that one?
Well, absolutely. Just for me, trust is a basic requirement if you want to be successful, because data has a value, and the people are only willing to share all this if they have trust that such a network or such an ecosystem will protect their value. And the second thing is not just trust from one to each other, but also, as we did not yet say, it's a cybersecurity question, because when there's so much value stored, it will maybe also a value for criminal people from outside. So there are a lot of requirements for this data to build up this trust, and so the people are willing to participate jointly in such an activity.
Okay, Sudhir, Amal, any comments on this issue? I mean, we've covered a lot here in terms of potential benefits. Some Bhaskar's outlined some of the challenges too in trying to get toward these data ecosystems. Anything to add on either front?
Just one thing, it makes a lot of sense, Bhaskar, everything what you said and Detlef said. There is a question really about manufacturers adopting the idea, embracing the idea of data first. It's very easy to go and grab some data, solve for a few specific problems. Trust will be created only in those data sets. What's required is there's so many data sets, there's so much data in manufacturing. Unless manufacturers start to think about the data first approach and create trust across the whole spectrum of data that they have, it gets harder and harder to scale after that. Data first mentality, I think, is key here, and transform all of it together, solve a few problems, show some wins, because you can't see ROI otherwise. But think about all the data you have and go with the data first approach, I think is critical.
Yeah, I'm all data first.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I would also, suggest that you have to take almost a curator's mindset. You have to curate your data estate is probably a term I would use, because you don't want to indiscriminately just keep garbage in, and then it becomes too much of a of good thing. But you have to take a strategic approach, decide what is important, how long to keep, the time series information, for example, what's the right sources. I think you have to take a curator's mindset to really carve out a strategic data estate plan, and then you get the most out of it, because otherwise it turns out, just end up being too expensive to just store, gigabytes of data.
Yeah.
So
well, we've talked a lot about data. We know that data volumes in manufacturing companies are growing exponentially as the companies and people and objects in those companies get more connected. Our own research here at MLC has shown that manufacturers expect up to a 400% increase in data volumes, their own data volumes, in the next few years. That's a lot of data to process and make sense of, particularly when we have a lot of the upfront issues in gathering data, formatting data, normalizing data, et cetera. But inevitably, it leads to artificial intelligence as an aid, a way to help get through all that data and find the real nuggets of intelligence in that data that can improve manufacturing. So what are some of the common challenges of integrating AI into existing manufacturing processes than you see? We saw a lot of demonstrations at Hannover about applications of AI, but what do you see as some of the common challenges of doing this, and how can they be addressed to build a foundation for really increasing value creation in a manufacturing environment? Bhaskar, would you like to take that one?
Yep, sure. So integrating AI into existing manufacturing process can certainly bring several benefits, no doubt. But the question becomes, how do you do it? Because obviously there are challenges here, especially when it comes to the data availability, the quality. I think we spoke about it. So obviously the AI algorithms require a large amount of high quality data for training and in order to make accurate predictions. So many manufacturing process may not have the suitable data readily available or in the required format. So therefore, in order to address this challenge, really, we need to identify the right data source and capture them systematically, process them, store them, and then ensure that it is normalized and transform data into usable format, right? That's number one. Number two is I can also think of the legacy systems and the infrastructure in any plant for the most part of the manufacturing organizations. I'm not talking about any state-of-the-art automobile industry, but by and large, if you take any manufacturing company, we still run on legacy infrastructure and systems. They are not meant for AI ready. They are not designed to integrate with any AI technologies or digital technologies for that matter. So how do you do that, right? So I think that's where we need to explore options about retrofitting or upgrading to their existing machineries to enable data collection and connectivity, or leverage or implement some sort of gateway devices or industrial IoT solutions to bridge that gap between the legacy systems and the AI applications that you intend to build. So that's the second aspect of it. And then the third aspect is there is a general challenge in the manufacturing, which also significantly impacts when it comes to AI discussion, is around the talent gap and the expertise which is required to trust the to trust the data. Not only trust the data, but also the required domain knowledge, the combination of data science and expertise around that, the engineering skills. Finding and retaining the talent, the right talent, can be a challenging too, right? And in order to mitigate this, then obviously companies are thinking about fostering some sort of collaboration with academic institutions or research organizations to tap into their expertise, or provide some sort of methodological training programs to upskill or reskill their existing talent base in order to meet that or remediate the challenge, the resource gap that we have in the industry today. And the last one is I can also think of the change management and the cultural shift which is required. Obviously, introducing AI into the manufacturing process often requires a cultural shift and change in the way how the people are going to work, right? A resistance to change can hinder successful integration and stuff like that. So I think in order to address this, we also seen that manufacturers have started to engage and involving employees in the AI integration process from the beginning all the way to the scaling the solution, right? And the last one is about the security and privacy concern. This is a general concern across the board. I think we have seen kind of spoke about this as well. This integration may require or involve collecting, analyzing sensitive data, where which raises concerns about the security and privacy as well. So how do you ensure that you create a robust security measure to protect the data, including encryptions and access controls, and ensure that the organizations are protected with their patents and stuff like that? So I think, again, like I said, this is a multi-fold challenges one may want to address, but it's all about how do we progress towards that, right? So, but definitely, if you ask me to prioritize that, I would definitely say security, privacy, legacy infrastructure are the huge challenges, and of course the data, the quality of data, are probably the primary reasons.
That's a lot of moving parts.
Absolutely.
The manufacturers have to contend with. Or, in the panel's experience, are there some best practices that you might be able to identify that manufacturers could rely upon to help get through all this? This is quite a list of challenges. Amal, want to take that one first?
Yeah, definitely. I think, Bhaskar, you said it well. I think, with all these things, there's also this excitement around AI. And sometimes what happens is within that excitement, you get tripped up into what exactly should I be doing? So AI is a very broad term, and perhaps it'll help firstly to understand the different types of capabilities that AI brings in, right? So firstly, recognize that there is machine learning, which can be, just applying statistics, things like regression models, and getting value out of just basic statistics using machine learning in terms of process control or forecasting, or doing things which have been done traditionally through statistical models, but bringing more horsepower to it in terms of, we have now evolution of things like AutoML, where you don't really have to even choose an algorithm. The system tries out different algorithms and picks the best fitting algorithm for the purpose. There's a lot of innovation in this space. There's going to be a lot of value in just using basic machine learning towards doing a lot of outcomes on the factory floor. Then you have the new cognitive services, or a capability to use vision, for example, as a source of data, as a using images, using video footages, use some of the cognitive capabilities to then unlock value, be it inspection, be it around health and safety in the factory floor, tapping into CCTV cameras and analyzing risky activities or detecting spills, for example. These scenarios can benefit from the cognitive AI models. That it's a separate class of models, if you will. Then you also have capabilities around reinforcement learning, where instead of having a pre-trained cognitive model, you can actually teach the model. So it's what is referred to as machine teaching, and you can train a neural network for a specific outcome. Things like machine calibration, for example, which takes hours and days, can be done in minutes if you have a simulation capability to train these models, and when it comes to actually optimizing or calibrating these machines, it can be done in minutes. So you have reinforcement learning as another class of models, and last but not the least, we of course have the generative transformer models, which is all the talk as you mentioned at the Hannover Fair. I mean, the number one interest was about GPT and where can I use the large language models, in terms of bringing capability to the factory floor. So that's the first step, I would say, in terms of best practices, is to understand that there are different class of these models, different capabilities. You have a portfolio of tools, and you got to choose the right tool for the right outcome. The second important step in this is to understand that all the factory processes or operations have an operator or a human in the loop. And this is a bit of a technical jargon I'm going into, but the human in the loop process is important because the human needs to build trust in the algorithm. You all mentioned this earlier, the trust dimension came up in the data context, but it's also in the AI model, a trained AI model context. You got to be able to validate the recommendations of the AI algorithm enough in different scenarios and different extreme conditions to be able to trust it. And then once you have that trust, you sort of transition into an autonomous operation. So you let the model do the job and let the machines take care of themselves, let the algorithm manage the process. And this doesn't happen, it's not like a day and night switch, but it's over time that you build trust into these and then transition to this model. So I think if you give it enough from this framework perspective, then you will see that AI becomes your friend and it helps you accelerate, bring that productivity, bring that cost reduction, bring that agility to the business.
Thank you. Dr. Zulka, any additional comments on best practices here?
Yes, just an example. When I joined the German Research Center for Artificial Intelligence in 2001 as a more mechanical or electrical automation engineer, I was talking to people from computer sciences, and still today people think we need people with computer science knowledge, and this is no longer true, because in the meantime this has developed in the direction of ready-to-use tools. So we have now a bunch of technologies which we can immediately use by using the right tools on the market. So for structuring data, for pattern recognition, semantic clustering, reasoning, decision-making, all this stuff is available in tools. Nevertheless, you need a different knowledge than you normally need for setting up an automated system. And this is what we have to teach, especially the young people, but also the people in the companies, so that they should have no fear of using these technologies and they move into this. Because when they don't do it, you will never have a data ecosystem, because AI and the data ecosystem, as you said before already, is a must together. Otherwise, we cannot make use of this large amount of data which we will get in future. So therefore, just start with it. There are tools available, and there are also people helping you, I'm pretty sure.
Well, let's transition now to the third subject area that was much in evidence at Hannover Fair last month, and that was these early emerging industrial metaverse applications. I use the words early and emerging with some advisory, because I guess many manufacturers are wondering whether this whole concept of an industrial metaverse is really real to them at this point. So let's start with what is an industrial metaverse? This is something more than Mark Zuckerberg is talking about, for sure. Detlef, can you define it for us?
Well, first of all, in more colloquial usage, I would say a metaverse is a virtual digital replica, or in other words, also a comprehensive digital twin of the real world, focusing on social and economic connection of humans and objects, for example. There are lots of other definitions available as well. But again, here I think it's some sort of a shell around those things which we are discussing already today, with all the technologies below. So in future, when you have access to all this data, you need a new way of bringing this data into your field, into your audience, for example. And now you can use all these technologies available, like those glasses, for example, like the VR, AR technologies which we have. This is what we will see in future, and we see it already today. So the metaverse today already in gaming is existing. It's existing in the fashion industry, for example, and now also in industry. For example, BMW, it was just yesterday here in the news that BMW decided together with NVIDIA to in future plan all their plans only by metaversal technologies. And that's what they did already in one plant, and they tested it, and it was really great. Very important, you need a digital twin world. You need these digital twins. So you need this base layer of technologies. This must be existing before you move into the metaverse. So there are nice pictures available. I think also a YouTube file is available where you can see what BMW did, for example. So this shows you wonderful what can be possible. On the other side, it's still a long way to go, because manufacturing is a very complex thing with a lot of things. You talk about human resources, you talk about logistics and everything. And if this should work all over the world, wherever you are, this is a very complex thing, and we will perhaps later address the things of the legal restrictions and all the political restrictions, for example.
Agreement on this definition, or are there variations in your minds that might also aid to understanding what this rather complex concept is for manufacturing? Amal, any thoughts on this?
Yeah, my thoughts go back to the book Snow Crash by Neil Stephenson. If you read it, he wrote it way back in the late 90s. If you're into science fiction, he's a cool guy. But the definition goes that if you order a pizza in the metaverse, it should show up on your doorstep, right, in the real world. So there is a strong connection between the digital metaverse and the real world. And this is where, and again, I'm being specific here in terms of an industrial metaverse. Let's not worry about the others for a moment. In the industrial metaverse, we see people, machines, and AI come together, right? That's the whole promise of the metaverse. And you're going to be able to do some very cool things in it, right? And we are seeing scenarios around collaboration. The BMW example that you mentioned, I think is brilliant. You can immerse yourself in that digital factory and navigate around and see what's around you. And imagine, Sudhir, for example, the data that your model generates can be overlaid into that, and magic happens, right? So when you see a spatial representation overlaid with operational data on top of it, you can collaborate through something like Teams, for example. Just like we share screens, we share and look at a common factory together, and do simulations on it. So there are phenomenal sets of use cases that you can bring in. We like to think in terms of 4 big buckets. We like to think in terms of like design, build, operate, and optimize as sort of the 4 big areas where you can catch these use cases. But the promise of this from an evolution, we started with factory digital twins, a few years back, and now we are evolving those twins into a bigger universe, the metaverse of things. So that's kind of how we look at it.
Yeah, I can see how the, and I'm glad we structured this discussion today to go from data ecosystems to AI to metaverse, how the prior two actually fit into this whole concept of the industrial metaverse. It also sounds like it's not an easy thing to do. What do you see as some 1 or 2 of the biggest challenges in a manufacturer embracing this concept of the industrial metaverse, and how would they go about dealing with that? Can I ask maybe Sudhir to jump in on that one and give a concise answer? Because we are about 10 minutes of it. I want to open it up for Q&A with the audience. But I want to tackle this question about the challenges for the metaverse, Sudhir.
No, I think we're definitely seeing most manufacturers wanting to go to that vision, an ability to have a metaverse, a 3D digital twin, visualizations. But the foundational challenge still remains the data, because once you have the 3D ability of the whole metaverse, You would like to see data, KPIs, material flow through the system. You would want to understand all of that. Starting with solving your data challenge, going back to where we started, data ecosystems, get the foundation in place, then build on it, is what most manufacturers are looking for in a very practical sense even now.
Okay. We have time for one quick comment on other challenges. Anybody like to take that? Detlef, Bhaskar, Amal?
Yes, just from my side, as I said already, what you absolutely need are worldwide standards. Otherwise, it will not work, because we talk about worldwide supply chains, and they need worldwide standards. So somebody sitting in a plant, let's say in China, and is checking a machine for a fault, he will have a direct connection to his home company in I don't know where. So it needs the standards. This is the one thing. And the second thing is surely if those governments worldwide will agree to use this data and to send this data over the borders. So what about the borders of data in that case? And I think this is much more important and much harder to solve than the technical questions.
Yeah, very good comment. Thank you. I'd like to open it up now to our audience. They must be brimming with questions on three very interesting and emerging topics for most companies, I would imagine. So, Lauren Bissett, have we gotten any questions in from our audience?
Of course we have some questions, and we probably have time for one, maybe two. So I'm going to throw the ChatGPT question out there with a comment saying ChatGPT is powerful because it leverages an existing and comprehensive data set. Should we be investing in internal data sets?
Who'd like to try that one, Amal?
I can take that. Yeah, great question. I think it's important to understand that there are a couple of different options that exist. You can, of course, tap into the ChatGPT type, or I would say broader transformer capability through OpenAI service, which is, of course, available. The more interesting part is that you can also create you can use the enterprise data boundary, so to speak, bring your own enterprise data sets and use Microsoft's OpenAI as a service, for example, to train and fine tune your data model. So what you have is basically you can take a large pre-trained AI model, and you can build sort of custom AI models that are fine-tuned with parameters and data from your organization. All of this comes with an enterprise-grade security, rollback, role-based access control, and features that ensure that you're using AI responsibly. So I think from an enterprise standpoint, it does make sense to start evaluating the outcomes that you're looking for. Start identifying the data sources. Again, goes back to my earlier comment on curating your data estate. Once you have a line of sight, again, all these are connected. Like David said earlier, it's a continuum. Once you understand what your vision is, you break it down from a metaverse standpoint. You come back, identify the data elements that are required, bring in tools like ChatGPT into it. So yes, from a data standpoint, it does make sense to sort of strategically think about what's available internally and what can be used.
Any other comments on this question before I ask Lauren whether we have a second?
So maybe just one comment I can add. There is an investment we are seeing a lot of manufacturers are doing, working with us right now around. There's a lot of machine data, ChatGPT, generative AI models. They all work. They are all basically large language models. You have to be able to translate your machine and your production data to becoming part of the large language models, because language models do not have the production data. That investment is needed. It can be accelerated with technology, but methods and ideas around how do we take all the existing production data, make it work with LLMs, is an investment that potentially is required for most of them.
I would add that, Sunil, perhaps you should talk about your showcase at Hannover, starting with the theme of this webinar. That was one of the hottest demos in Hannover, where you were able to show the ChatGPT interface into what would otherwise take.
That definitely clicked, I think, with a lot of manufacturers, where you had the ability, if you translate all the production data large language models and you're using that with the OpenAI service or any ChatGPT service, you have an ability to ask questions on your production data. For example, What is the performance of my machine over the last 1 week? You could compose that as an email. You can compose that as a communication to someone else. Absolutely possible. Those potential possibilities did resonate quite well at Hannover with most manufacturers.
Okay, Lauren, I think we have time for one more question.
Well, you know what? I'm afraid that these questions are pretty intense and they're going to put us like way over. So what if we look to do maybe like a final recap and go through our last few things, if that would work for everyone?
Sure. Maybe final thoughts from the panelists. We've talked about data ecosystems. We've talked about artificial intelligence. We've talked about the industrial metaverse. Obviously, there is convergence among these three areas. Thinking about that, where do you see the whole thing going? Are we really crafting a whole new way to make things here in the future? Let's start with Amal.
Yes, all of the above, as I would say, but particularly a thought comes to my mind from Harry Truman. He said, "Imperfect action is better than perfect inaction." And I think if there's one thing that I would recommend the audience is take your ideas, make them real, start now, do something with it, right? And again, there are at least 4 or 5 different organizations we are representing on this webinar. We are here to help. We are learning along the way. We have experts who can help. You're not in this alone, and we can do this together. I think would be an important call out.
Okay, we're going to go in alphabetical order by first names. Bhaskar next.
There we go. All right. So one thing which I learned is Hannover event is no longer a technology event. So this is all about business driven, business outcome. I think it's all about data everywhere. We clearly see that. And also it is very interesting or encouraging to see that the customers are even trying to move out of this pilot purgatory, right? They all want to scale, they all want to move on. There is a tremendous maturity in terms of how the data conversation has shaped up in the last few years. So it is all encouraging. Are we in a perfect world? Probably not, but we are all progressing towards that, which is really encouraging to see that happen.
Yeah, thank you. Detlef.
Well, looking, for example, to Hannover again, you would have seen less and less the word Industry 4.0 there. So what you see is Dash X, as you mentioned already. So Gaia X as the base technology, and then, for example, Catena X for the automotive industry, now Manufacturing X for the manufacturing industry. And this is where we are moving right now. And all the companies around, they should be aware of the situation. You can buy all the connectors and all the smart stuff on the market in the meantime. That's available. But now we are in the phase 2 of this industrial revolution, and we want to make new application fields there. And this is mostly based on data. And so we need also new paradigms. And this is now, for example, what we call Manufacturing X. And I think this will shape the future of the discussion in the next years.
Yeah, thank you. And Sudhir, you have the last word.
I have a very practical thing that I've been thinking about quite a bit when we talk to manufacturers, and especially it has evolved quite a bit. We've spoken about IT-OT convergence for so long. It looks like the value in using the data, acknowledgement of the value is high enough. We now talk to IT and ops together all the time. It's no longer separately, which I think is a big change, and that is the basic requirement to make this a reality. What do you do with this data? We see that happening.
Thank you. I think we can wrap up now, Lauren. I think we have a few closing slides.
We do, and I'll just pull them up. You could talk about the additional resources and I'll get our slides.
Okay, we do have additional resources for any of you in the audience who want to learn more about these subjects. Lauren will put up the slide in about a moment. I do want to remind everybody, we're actually doing a study on the metaverse. We would appreciate your participation in it. All you have to do is use that QR code and take the survey. We would appreciate your input. It's very important to us. I think the next one is on what, Lauren? Rethink? Yes, it's Rethink, the 19th annual Rethink Summit. our flagship event here at MLC. We're going to be talking about accelerating digital transformation in manufacturing, June 26th through 28th. If you haven't signed up for it, please do. We're starting to run out of rooms at the hotel, so you better act fast. And lastly, Lauren, thank you for joining us. Thank you to Amal, Sudhir, Bhaskar, and Detlef for their insights into these three really, really interesting areas that were talked about today. I'm David Brosell. I look forward to seeing you on future Manufacturing Leadership Council events and in our plant tours and in everything else we do. So have a great day and see you at Rethink.
Okay.
Thank you for having us.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.